Um, Welcome to the webinar, everyone. How to position your hotel to win in the new normal. So today we're going to be talking about this concept of the new normal and what we need to do to prepare for it and what it really means. Before we get started, I just want to do a small introduction of myself. My name is Paul Pedrick. I've been a consultant for the hotel industry for about 20 years. I worked with TIG Global and Micros in the past, and I've worked with brands such as Omni and the Doyle Collection, the Preferred Hotel Group, Global Hotel Alliance. When we're talking about the new normal, I think we have to say, what does that mean? We hear in the news that concept bandied about a lot. I think the new normal when it comes to our industry is really dealing with what is essentially going to be some variability in demand and variability in terms of the guest psychology. Travel and hospitality is a little bit different than some industries in that it really depends on a lot of trust. So I think as hoteliers, the question really is how do we not only get the trust of the guest and how do we change our operations to do that, but also how do we make sure that we're making up for what is essentially lost revenue for this period of time in which there has been lots of hotel closures. Before we get into some of the details of this, I want to actually launch a poll. What we want to do is we want to find out when you think rates, ADR will, across the board, across all categories, will return to normal levels or relatively normal levels. Occupancy, as we know, is really far down at this point, and rate is also pretty far down as well. There are some rate categories that are recovering a little bit here and there, but what we're interested in just finding out what your prognosis for the future is. So we'll go ahead and launch this poll and take a moment to go ahead and put your vote in. In the meantime, I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves. I'm going to start with Bob Graham from Event Temple. Bob, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Paul. So my name is Bob Graham. I'm from Event Temple. I'm the CEO and co-founder here. We're based in Vancouver, Canada, and we build sales and catering software for hotels.
Thank you. Also, Dan from BookBoost, do you want to go ahead?
Thank you, Paul, and nice to virtually meet you all here. My name is Daan de Bruin. I'm co-founder and CEO of BookBoost. Previously, I've been spending my time in hospitality on innovation and been focused on mostly loyalty. That led me to my current position and at BookBoost, which is a guest messaging platform utilizing technology and communication channels and bundling all that into one interface where you also have the background information about the guests. So you have everything around digital communication into one interface. So I'm excited to be here today. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Dan. And then Josh Schaap, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks, Paul. So my name is Josh Schaap. I'm currently co-founder of Roomdex. Prior to Roomdex, which we actually just started a couple of months ago, I was founder of Stay in Touch for almost 7 years. Prior to that, I worked at Micros for almost 18 years, most of that as the SVP of Global Product Development for all Opera products. So I've got about 30 plus years in hotel software, and I'm really looking forward to today's conversation with Dan, Bob, and Paul.
Excellent, thank you. So very interesting poll results. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll right now, and then I'll share the results. It seems like we've got a couple optimists out there who believe that rates may recover in 3 to 6 months. Gotta love the optimists. Majority of folks look like they're thinking 12 months or longer for recovery. The truth is, I think that some rate categories may recover much sooner than others, but you know, we're really talking about on average across the board. But kind of very interesting food for thought. So let's get into our presentation a little bit. Let's talk a little bit just to set the stage about the status of the current industry. Now, recently I was watching an excellent broadcast where Cindy Estes Green of Calibri Labs was presenting some data that her company produces on the state of the industry. And she said that as of, and this was, I think, April 30th, it was the end date on this. I'm not really sure. Maybe actually, no, maybe it was like the beginning of May. But 4,905 hotels have closed. Either they've closed doors temporarily or completely, which is about 16.2% of all hotel rooms. This is in the United States. She went on to say verbally that in her estimation, kind of back of envelope, there's been about 15,000 hotels in the US that have been closed at least partially during this COVID outbreak, which is kind of interesting. If we look looking at some other data that was brought up by STR in another presentation I saw, we'll see that Europe is actually doing much worse when it comes to hotel closings. Their estimation at the end of April, there was a 76% of hotels were in a closed state. And you can kind of see globally, it's a very common state, across the world. In terms of recovery, STR also was tracking sort of recovery in different regions. In this particular case, they were looking at Europe, US, and China. China, is recovering more quickly. Of course, that they had the virus first, but are now recovering first. The US seems to be recovering in this slightly faster than Europe, which is pretty much closed down. Now, I think the important thing to think about there is that the recovery in these different places may be driven less by consumer sentiment and more by government regulations. I think in Europe, there's a lot more government closings of hotels currently than in the US, which may account for some of these numbers like this. But anyway, it's not a pretty picture. But what I want to do is I want to pass the screen over to Bob Graham, who maybe has a different focus on this than maybe some do. One of the things that we want to emphasize in this entire presentation is that it's really about focusing on what lies ahead. Right now, when we've got great attendance at this webinar. Chances are that's because there's not a lot of people working in the hotels right now. Now is the time not to sit on your hands, but to focus on what lies ahead and in what's going to be coming down the pike. And so with that, I'm gonna sort of hand it off to Bob.
Sure, thanks, Paul. So, it's definitely been a tough couple of months, and you see STR predicting continued drop across the board in 2020. But I thought what was interesting is their prediction for 2021, things basically getting to pre-COVID levels again. And for most of my adult life, I've been traveling for business, and I really can't see when people make the argument video conferencing is going to take over and that's the new normal. I don't think that's going to be the case. And I spoke to a friend last night and he said, Bob, we're already living in a post-pandemic world. The Spanish flu happened in 1918, 1919, and the hotel industry in North America basically developed significantly after that. So I think we've got a lot of travel ahead of us. But in the next few months, there's certainly going to be a new normal as things pick back up. But I think people still need to meet each other in person, educational events, networking. But there's going to be new precautions in place, and definitely a lot more hand sanitizer. I think those stocks are probably all up right now. But we've certainly been through it. You can jump to the next. So in this survey from the Global Business Travel Association, I thought this was really interesting. So you've got half of respondents saying it's going to come back really fast. So like in the summertime here. Another third said about a year from now. I'm thinking meeting in the middle. So I am definitely an optimist, but I don't think it's going to be back by summer. We might see some leisure travel and some staycations and things like that as things slowly start to open back up. But for domestic business travel, I think October, November, December makes a lot more sense. So my whole thing that I'm seeing is the best sales organizations are starting now. They know that it takes a lot of touches in the sales process to find new prospects, just to get to the right person. And if you start in the fall when things start to come back, you're already too late. I think too, there's going to be a lot of competition for the business that does start to come back online. I just watched a webinar with Rupesh Patel and Tammy Gillis, and she was saying, you know, the blue collar, the gray collar market segments, those are already generating business, and hotels are seeing occupancy increases. So I think if you have a plan and you start working on the plan now, you're much more likely to succeed as things start to go back. This was a screenshot I took from Travis Burns. He's just someone I follow on LinkedIn from Aimbridge, but he definitely posts what they're out doing. And I thought this was interesting for a couple big reasons. First, this was the GM taking the business. It wasn't the DOS or the sales manager. And this is a 75K deal, so not a small deal, taken from a competitor, doing tactics we all know about, right? Like parking lot drive, prospecting, and it's working now. It's not working in the fall. They're doing it today and getting business. So imagine 6 months from now, they're going to be ramped up. Your hotel also needs to be ready. And you can do it with the staff you already have, and it doesn't have to be a full-time sales effort, which I'll talk about a little bit here. So in my experience, many hotels don't think about sales or do much in terms of sales at all. So I wanted to talk about today a pretty simple 4-part sales strategy that you can do remotely from home from anywhere, and you can commit as much or as little time as you need to it. And whether or not things do pick up, it's still going to be a valuable asset. So you're not wasting your time. So I'll talk about finding prospects, building your list, doing your outreach, and then growing those relationships, because of course we want to keep our past customers as well. So the list, I've got a couple tips here. First, only you know the market segments that your property needs to go after. That's going to vary by location, by property, but make a list of all the market segments you want to target. From there, just go on Google and start searching lists of accounts that fit that market segment. Then you're going to go and find their website. LinkedIn is now your best resource, because you can go and you can find that account on LinkedIn. You can search the job title you want to find. You can find that exact person. Write down their first and last name. So you should have the account, the website, and the contact's name. And you can go on hunter.io, which is a really cool tool, because you basically just enter their website, enter their first and last name in Hunter, and it's going to give you their exact email address. I believe it's $50 a month for your first 1,000 contacts. There's some free ones as well. So you're able to build a list of prospects this way. And what you'll find is you're probably not right on a lot of these job titles and a lot of these contacts, and you need to get referrals to the right person. So that's why starting now is so important. You can use a spreadsheet, or you can use Excel or Google Docs or something like that, but probably the best thing to use is a CRM, because you can tie your accounts to your contacts, to your tasks. But however you want to do it, I just wanted to hammer home that if you have lists of these prospects, you're a step ahead, and you know who you can target. You can gather data on them. You can talk to them now, so that when things do go back, you're not just scrambling to go after the business. You already know these people, and you built relationships over some time. Okay, if you're comfortable, the next step is email outreach. What to avoid here is you don't want to send the classic MailChimp email marketing with a big image. You want to create personal emails that are plain text that you took the time to type out. Avoid anything generic, and do not be the pushy, desperate salesperson right now. I think the best sales tactic I've seen through COVID-19 is just to be human, and just to reach out and say, like, hey, how are you doing? We're here. This is what's going on with us. A couple of key sales tips are just to make it about them, not about you. Educate, build a relationship, and use your judgment too. If your gut's saying, I don't think this account would want to be talked to right now, just save the information for later. Just the list alone is immensely valuable. So this is an example email that I wrote, but I think what's more important than the exact text, I wouldn't want you to copy and paste it and everyone's sending the same one, is just the idea behind it. So the first thing I do here is I acknowledge the elephant in the room, right? We're all going through a strange and unusual time, and just be human about it. Like, it is weird. Nobody knows the right answer or what to do. Go in with the idea that business is probably a good thing. It's not a bad thing to be out trying to get the economy going again, but it is a bad thing to be pushy. So just have that in the back of your head and tell them why you're reaching out. And your goal could be that I want to be the safest property in the area. When it returns, what are your concerns going to be? Or how are you doing? Something like that. So just quick, to the point, couple sentences, plain text. And anything you can do to personalize it really makes a difference. So using their first name, using their company name, just something quick like that. So a couple of other notes here. I think drop-ins right now are extremely inappropriate. I wouldn't do that. It's also more of an old school sales tactic. It can still work, but not in a COVID world, you know, where people are still sick, they're afraid of meeting strangers. I think definitely do not do that. But why I like this approach is you can do it from home. You can build a list that's valuable no matter what. You're sending emails, and you can also support this with all of your marketing. So the best salespeople I see, they don't just send the email and forget about it. They basically make a cadence where they go, okay, first month I'll send the email. Next month, maybe I'll follow them on social and I'll like and comment on their posts. And I'll try to engage with them online a little bit. Then I'll send them some marketing messaging through email marketing. Maybe if I've got a guide on best walking trails in the area, or something that's, you know, kind of acknowledging that there is a new normal and what you're going to do about it. I think that can be very helpful. Safety and cleaning procedures at the hotel, those are interesting. But just support it. Don't just send the email and let it go. And I think social media, specifically LinkedIn, is your best bet there. And then keep in mind, over time, you'll be able to automate a lot more of this. But I think during COVID, it's a chance to just start small, do it in a personalized way, and really go one-to-one email. I would also touch base with past accounts. So if you have a CRM, you'll have a list of those. If you don't, you can go through your PMS and look for corporate accounts. But your competitors are also going to be looking to steal your customers right now. Like I said, there's going to be more competition, I think. And before COVID, companies had a hard time keeping 10 to 30% of their customers. Every year they would leave. And it's very expensive to get new customers, better to keep old ones. And it really makes sense to reach out to them. So if you're feeling hesitant about sending that sales email, a good way to start and get through some of that apprehension and fear is to start messaging your past accounts and just touching base and saying, hey, how are you? You know, thinking about your business, wondering how things are going. Quick message and see how it goes. Also, sales is a very long-term strategy. So I like to set goals on activities, not results. And this is a really key point people get wrong. So in my experience, people will say, okay, yeah, we're going to do sales at the hotel, Bob. They'll do it for a month or two. They won't see a boost in revenue and they'll stop. If you remember the earlier slide where we talk about all the touches it takes just to get to the right prospect, you can see building a relationship takes a very long time. But it's worth it, and it's an asset that you have that you can keep reusing. So bringing past accounts back, getting introductions and referrals, but more importantly, having a repeatable sales process. So if you knew, you know, if I can get X number of people on my list every week and send X number of emails every single month, I would get X number of customers and revenue. Well, I'm sure you do it. So it's all about making the funnel, thinking long-term, and going through the activities every week, week in and week out. But do analyze what people are saying and respond to it and be sensitive to, you know, the feedback they're giving you. If they're saying, don't message me, don't message them. If you're not getting replies, try a different job title. Some things like that you can change. So it is a difficult time. It is really hard on, you know, the entire industry, but I think it's also an opportunity for those that are willing to reinvent themselves. I think the opportunity is to reduce some reliance on OTAs, increase direct business, and adopt a sales strategy. Start internet prospecting. Start with 10 a week on your list, then add to 20, then go to 30. The best companies are already out doing it. And then over time, you can start to leverage technology to add some automation, make your tracking better. But this is a really great time to look at how to make sales and prospecting part of your business strategy. So just to sum up, don't wait for the business to come in or it's going to be too late. If you're not doing sales right now, you can do it. Your GM can do it. And I think it's time to get started today so that you're ready for the fall.
Excellent. Thanks, Bob. Bob, I have a question. How long do you think that this process, based on, you know, the recovery curve, how is that going to impact your normal sales cycle? If your sales cycle is a certain period of time, what are we adding in terms of time based on these special circumstances?
I think the key is to look at market segments. So if you prospect for essential services businesses, or so I'm thinking like, well, construction's a great example, agriculture, medical, those sorts of segments, they're much more likely to respond right now. I spoke with someone just yesterday who's in California where a lot of tech companies are. And he said, you know, they're not coming back because some of them have extended their work from home into 2021. So I think it's about understanding the market segments in your area, who you've worked with in the past, and just starting to chat with them about when they're seeing things coming back online. So that question in my email earlier about when do you expect to start traveling again, that's really important because you're going to get that data from doing the outreach and doing the prospecting. But I think use your intuition, start where there's some easy wins, and if you have a gut feeling that this is going to be a harder segment, maybe leave that till later.
Cool. Thank you. That's excellent practical advice. So now I want to hand it over to Dan, who's going to speak a little bit more about communicating with the guests and the end customer. So,
thank you, Paul. Yeah. So yeah, indeed. So I'll be spending the next 10 minutes or so on guest communications, guest engagement, and the guest experience. And just as a starters, this picture used to have a different meaning to me, but now in this new situation, it kind of symbolizes how I feel. And also when I speak to many hoteliers, this is my interpretation of how many of them feel as well. Like where the situation is different for all of you, there is a horizon, and underneath the clouds, things have changed. On the consumer side of things, where there's more uncertainty and where obviously safety now is crucial, and where supply and demand has changed. And while simultaneously it's often difficult for the consumer to obtain their needed information to make decisions. And for you as the hotelier, where occupancy has dropped and RevPAR has dropped, you're expected to maintain your level of service. You want to take care of your operations, you want to take care of your team. And while you might not have the resources now and nor the tools to cater to this guest in this new situation. So before you go down that mountain into the new normal, our recommendation is as well to now use this time to think ahead and to implement strategies to kind of prevent, before the market is back up to speed, before you are in that situation, to prevent that you cause a sort of like a snowball effect and become reactive and lag behind of competition. It's a chance now to think ahead and be one step ahead of that and think about, okay, what is this new normal gonna mean for me? And what strategies can I implement to be able to cater towards today's guest and towards the guest that has new expectations. So on the next slide, Paul, on these 3 principles, you can be thinking about loads of concepts. So being proactive, offering self-help, and to be accessible. So when there's uncertainty, there's a higher demand on clarity, and there's a chance for you as a brand to proactively share information, to proactively create touch points, to build trust. Like from a consumer point of view, when I receive information about your policies that you've probably been thinking of and about your efforts, that builds trust and make me want to choose your brand over others now, but also in the future. And providing self-help tools, meaning providing options to your guests where they can help themselves. But also when there's more uncertainty, there's a higher need for control and a higher sense for wanting to have control. And while doing so, when you make yourself easily accessible, actually the demand will be much lower because most of your guests will be able to figure themselves out. But when you are able to be accessible, you also reassure the guests so that they know that you think of them, that they know that you take care of them, and that they know they can reach out to you in case they need to. So when you apply these principles on the guest journey, you can think on the pre-booking phase, and this is of course what Bob has talked about. You can think about keeping your guests informed, your guests that have previously visited your properties or potential guests. Create touch points. You've probably done a lot, or you are doing a lot, changing a lot to be able to cater towards, in this new situation, towards your guest. And make sure that you also communicate that, because your guests perhaps don't know that. So when you create these touch points and make relevant touch points in reaching out to your guests, you build up trust and you will win those customers over your competition. And yeah, so then when looking at the pre-booking phase, often your website is the first opportunity to make a good first impression. So also there you can provide clear information. Make sure that you update your website so that your potential guests know what they're up to. You can accommodate your website with a chat functionality, for instance, where you can also answer most frequently asked questions automatically. So again, offer a self-help tool. And in case there is an out-of-the-box question, you make yourself accessible for your potential guests. And in case also in that chat functionality, they have a question, they can connect one of their messaging channels in case they leave the website, so that you can answer on those channels and that they don't need to sit and wait on the website. And also after the booking has been made, try to think ahead of what your guests will need in this new situation. There will be new needs. And when you are proactive about that, you don't rely and you don't wait for your guests to come to you, but you already share the information proactively, which again builds trust and also makes you more efficient, because you're not reactive, waiting on your guests with their questions, but you already share relevant information before they have to reach out to you. So these are just a few examples, and how you can apply this to your organization is of course different for each of you. But with such guest journey map that you see here in the picture, you can facilitate a workshop, and you can do this yourself. Get your team together, think about what needs your guests have in the different phases of their journey, and what moments they go through in those different phases, and how you want them to feel at those specific moments. And this is an example that we did with one of our customers. We facilitated this workshop, but you can also do this yourself, and it doesn't need to be this extensive. And then from that, what you get as a deliverable is touch points in your journey. And perhaps you, as a starter, identify the 3 to 5 most important ones. And then as a result, you will have important moments in your guest journey that you can improve to make sure that your guest feels reassured in this new normal. And then as a result, what you can have on the next slide is, for instance, a message that goes as follows. Hi, Eva, your room is clean and waiting for you. Click here for check-in, and we'll hand over your room key in the lobby when you're here. See you soon. So what this message does is that it makes sure that you're in charge of your process. So you're proactive about your operations. So the guest knows what they're up to. They feel in control. They feel that you take care of them. They know what to do. And this has as a benefit that you become more efficient in your operations. And also, since this is a scalable solution, whether your occupancy is low or higher at certain points, it makes you more adaptive and less dependent on optimizing your human resources. So bottom line, try to think ahead of what new needs your guests will have, and use this time now to sit down, create a map for yourself if you haven't done so. And from that map, you will get as deliverable touch points that are relevant for your operation. And from knowing what touch points those are, you can then look out for relevant solutions that can help you to prepare yourself for the new normal.
Thanks, Dan. I mean, I think my takeaway is that I think transparency is probably more important than ever for the hotelier guest interaction. You know, I think that we're dealing with, it's not so much that a guest is going to necessarily distrust you as a hotelier, but they probably, you know, the emphasis on messages about safety or about cleanliness is just probably something that needs to probably underlie a lot of the communications that you're doing in order to kind of create this sort of environment where everybody's speaking the same language.
Right.
So lastly, I'm gonna hand over to Yas, who's now going to, we've talked about the sales side, we've talked about the guest side, and now I think that we're going to talk about a little bit on the revenue side. Is that correct?
That is correct. But I first wanted to add a bit more to what Dan just showed, that mapping of you know, the journey. I think it's actually pretty interesting to do that at multiple times. I actually, as I think I told you in the beginning, I just started this new company, Roomdex, and I spend a lot of time looking at who's, you know, I'm in this business for 30 years, but I spend a lot of time the last couple of weeks on who would be my customer, what would hotels want, which are things that hotels should also be thinking about. You know, who is truly my guest? What does the guest want today, and what does he want tomorrow? And map it all out before you truly go back out there and start selling. I think that can be very enlightening and helpful in establishing a good strategy. But let's speak a bit more about where we go from here. So I think great insights from both Dan and Bob, and as well as Paul. So let's assume for a moment, you know, that we're now a few weeks down the road, and you have implemented some of Bob's suggestions around guest acquisition, reach out and nurturing. Your guests are now, you know, they're weathering the COVID-19 storm, and they're going to be ready to go out and travel again, and you're ready to welcome guests to your hotel. So you have established a low occupancy strategy, so you kind of start working on that, and it's probably going to be the norm for a little while to have that low occupancy. So that strategy is going to be key. OTAs have suffered also quite a bit. There's a lot of news about Booking and Expedia. Booking apparently needs cash to actually survive, which is quite strange after all the money they've probably subtracted from you guys over the last many years. So there is certainly opportunity there, I think, to work with Booking and other OTAs to renegotiate that. So it's certainly something to think about. Is this a good time to reduce the reliance that you have on OTAs? Will guests continue to book through OTAs? Or will they look for hotels more directly? Where can they best verify the hygiene and cleanliness of the hotel? They can probably do that best on the hotel's website, or by calling the hotel, or, you know, using some of Dan's you know, technologies, which would be guest messaging. Finding out from the hotel directly, is the hotel clean, is it safe, and what sort of policies does it have in place that would make, you know, the guest comfortable to do so. It's highly unlikely that the OTA can provide that information in much detail. So then you have to think about reducing rates. So while reducing rates, something you will want to avoid is to keep at least to keep the minimum. So given the rules of supply and demand, there is most likely going to be a lot of supply and very little demand. So whether we want to reduce the price or not, it's going to be a given that we almost have to do that. People and consumers will want to look for a deal because they know there's just simply a lot of rooms available. Combining Bob and Dan's strategy should bring you even closer to a better recovery. With digital messaging, you can nurture, inform, and communicate at guests, as you know, Dan kind of explained. Or before they arrive in the hotel, you can talk about the hygiene, you can talk about the things you're doing to make them more comfortable. When they're on their way to the hotel, you can talk to them about you know, how they can get into the hotel. You can use the guest smartphone to keep social distancing easy and achievable for both hotel and for guests. Next slide, Paul. So safety and hygiene, as mentioned, are paramount, I think, in the beginning. I don't think this pandemic will stop people from traveling, as Bob also mentioned in the beginning. People have been traveling for thousands of years, but the hype that we see being exposed in the news, and also the quite substantial amount of news and information that larger hotel chains are now focusing on clean and safety with all kinds of new programs to provide ease to the hotel guests. That's probably going to be a main focus for everyone now. In a way, it's a little strange. Many diseases are always going around and have been for years. We've slept in hotels for thousands of years. And nobody really thought about thinking that the germ from one person could necessarily make the other one sick or spread this diseases very often. But probably throughout the years you've become sick by staying in a hotel because somebody else stayed in that room the night before, and you probably caught onto the flu or something. All these things seem to be fairly okay and normal until, I guess, COVID-19 came around. So in my opinion, I think today hotels are clean and safe. They're probably not less safe than they used to be. But I guess it's not just me, it's everybody out there in the world. It's important that you can create a perception for everyone out there that the hotel is clean and that you've basically made your efforts to do so. So what used to be an invisible given for hotels, all the cleaning happened in the background and was not advertised. Now, and especially until the vaccine will be around, it has to be important that you show to the guests that you are having a clean hotel, that you've got everything in place, that your hotel is comfortable and clean. I think that's a totally important component. So you have to show that when you interact with the guest, whether it's digital or in person. You have to show that on your website. You have to show that as part of your booking. You have to show that while the guest is in the hotel. All these things are really becoming very important. Then some countries and states have imposed rules that rooms cannot be occupied with the next guest for up to 48 hours, while the cleaning can only happen 24 hours after the guest has left. So how do you manage that? Probably not a PMS system has a automatic feature to manage that. So most likely you have to figure this out on a spreadsheet and put the rooms out of order, to enable this 48-hour room quarantine. So I'm kind of curious how hotels will start to resolve that, but there's really not much technology out there to deal with that particularly in the foreseeable future requirement. I think before we get into revenue, most important, I think it is to find solutions and to think about contactless technologies that really help social distancing or promote social distancing. So of course, mobile check-in and check-out is absolutely important. Mobile key, if you have the money or if you have the technology already in place, certainly something to look at. Now is a good time. Self-service, definitely work on that. And minimizing the time at the front desk, I think, is something that's going to become very important. If you can avoid the trading of IDs and credit cards, that probably would really be helpful in the check-in process and would give the customer, I guess, probably a very good amount of confidence. So other than mobile key, which probably requires you to replace all kinds of locks, most of those technologies I just mentioned are very easy to acquire. They're all SaaS enabled. They require minimum investment and they have very little risk as well. So they could be a very good tool to help you recover and provide the service that guests want today. Next slide, Paul. So low occupancy is the unfortunate thing most hotels will be faced with for the next couple of months and probably even multiple quarters. We saw that in the poll we did earlier on. It's going to be a while before we can increase rates and before occupancy will return. Data forecasts from STR estimate full recovery of the 2009 occupancy will not happen until sometime in 2022, which is fairly far away. It's definitely more a year or two or so. And they probably estimate that the occupancy will be back to 60 or 80% of what it used to be in 2019, sometime in 2021. That's probably a level whereby you can run a profitable hotel. You probably won't make, a huge profit, but you can operate, run your hotel, and make sure everybody gets what they deserve. Then second to this low occupancy, there's going to be the rule I just mentioned. Some countries and states will impose a 20 to 48 quarantine on hotel rooms, which after guests have checked out. So basically, if you assume for a moment that this is only 24 hours and you have a 50-room hotel with an average length of stay of 1 night, that means all of a sudden you only have 25 rooms for your maximum occupancy available. So you have to cut the occupancy and the rooms that you can sell in half in order to fulfill these requirements. As I earlier mentioned, now might also be a good time to team up with other hoteliers about the OTA rates and then negotiate those down. I think there's truly there an opportunity to work with those and get that in a better shape, and in the future rely less on those than you have in the past. Next slide, Paul. So the poll we did at the beginning of the webinar also shows that recovery will long and that rates will take a time to get back. So I'm sure that you have the best intentions to get the rate as fast as possible to where you want it to be, but that may necessarily not be an opportunity for you to do. Last night, while I was preparing for this webinar, I decided to check on availability in Washington, D.C. Downtown for the weekend of 13th and 14th of June. And by listing the hotels on Expedia, I saw the Watergate Hotel was offering a room for $127. Normally they are at $250. The Marriott Convention Center, which was offering one for $82, normally way above. I've never seen that below $200. And the Crown Plaza somewhere downtown was offering one rate for $49. So very, very low rates, less than half of what they normally are. And also when you looked at the next available quality of rooms, so the suite or the corner suite, those were immediately priced double of what the deal that was shown for the standard rooms. I think that doubling of the price is going to be very hard for consumers and guests to swallow. They probably are looking for the deal when they book. So if they're a few weeks out of going to a hotel, they're going to look for a deal that's as cheap as they can get it, because they know they can get a good deal. However, as they get closer to arrival date, and while CNN keeps spreading horror COVID-19 stories, you can bet they will publish a few on hotel ones too in the very near future. Guests will probably start to think, okay, I got this room booked, this standard room booked. How do I get into that room without, least amount of people interaction? And how do I, how do I get more comfortable, as I probably will spend less time in the public areas, in the restaurants and in the bars, because they may be closed or there may be just, not enough space to hang out there. They might be looking for a nicer and bigger room as they get closer to arrival. So that probably presents some opportunities. Next slide, Paul. The guest booked your hotel and is preparing to make that trip. And in some cases, they might be looking for a second deal. And the next best room for a nice upgrade price is probably something they will want to look for. They will think and prefer to spend less time in public spaces, as I just mentioned. They're happy to travel again, so they're eager. They're probably also interested in spending some extra money, and they're probably open for something easy and simple, especially if it can be contactless. So they are ready to set to come to your hotel, and you should offer them then close to arrival a nicer and better deal to get potentially into a slightly bigger room at a smaller rate, or small price change. Basically is to give both the guest and give the guest the feeling that he not only has one but basically two deals. And why should you do this? For two reasons, I think. One, it will give you some higher margin revenue back that you need and deserve in order to keep your hotel going. And second, the guest will probably be very pleased, but because you've given the guest, in essence, two deals. First, you've given the guest a standard deal while they were booking a week or two ago at the lowest price available. You've shown at that time that your next level rooms are much more expensive. And second, you've given the guest an opportunity to buy a second deal by moving him or her to the corner suite for only $30 or $40 more. So you've created basically a very good perception by the guest that going to feel very good about staying in your hotel, getting all these deals. And if it's done digitally, it's all contactless, it's clean, and it's safe. So it's kind of a great way of bringing some additional revenue into your hotel bag, as well as pleasing the guest in a nice way. So a last recommendation of us would be to add a good digital upsell strategy to your technology stack. I think that's certainly something you should look at. Especially once you have in place the CRM technologies and you have the communication in place with the guest, you have updated on your website all the the importance around cleaning and health and all these kind of things, and you have the digital guest messaging in place whereby you can consume and communicate with guests at any time, adding to that the ability to drive some additional revenue while you please the customer, giving them some more space and privacy. I think it's a great opportunity to bring some additional ADR to your hotel. Next slide, Paul. So it sounds strange to kind of sum it all up. It sounds strange, but we hope that Paul, Bob, Dan, and myself have given you some thoughts and opportunities to strategize about in order to reopen your hotel and find a way to recover your ADR and occupancy over the next couple of quarters. So summing it all up here, I think our main takeaways. First one is it's time to switch from responding to crisis to begin to lead forward, recovering. So look for recovery and find ways to lead your hotel into the right direction. I'm sure you've put all the actions already in place to get the hotel in a good shape. Now it's time to think forward again. Second, and as Bob mentioned, it's probably hard, but now is the time to get ready to sell your hotel, to make people aware of your hotel, to make sure that you have, that they know that you've survived COVID and that you're there for them, and that you're clean with great hygiene strategy have in place. And thirdly, it's important to create a sales and revenue strategy assuming lower occupancy, because it's kind of an ADR. It's kind of a given. There's not much around it for the moment. And find a way to get guests to book at first. And once you have booked them, you can take further actions in trying to increase revenue and guest satisfaction. The fourth one is implementing a digital guest messaging and marketing strategy can really help bring your guests away from the OTAs back into your hotel and helping you and the hotel to communicate together about particular things that guests want to know about. Reducing physical touch points at check-in and check-out is probably now paramount. We've been talking about that throughout this webinar. It's probably everywhere on LinkedIn and everywhere else these days to find people to find products and solutions that can assist hotels with reducing the physical touch points. So focus on those, get those in place, and relatively easy to achieve as well. And number 6, enhance revenue where you can, and try to do that also with a contactless digital upgrade strategy in place. Now is a good time to focus more on upsell and upgrade than you ever did before, because it simply helps you bringing in some additional margin, and it's definitely a good way to please your customers. Last, all of these things you can do, I think, today with SaaS technology that's available out there. They have, SaaS technology has very little budget constraints because it's a monthly fee. It's often a very low risk. Some of the vendors out there offer it for free to start with until they've shown you ROI. So it's basically a very small amount of money that can help you as a hotelier to find solutions that can get you out of this, downturn back into recovery mode and bringing more revenue and guests to your hotel. And that's it from me, Paul.
Well, thanks very much, Jas. Before we have a couple questions that we want to have the panelists answer. Before we get into that, we're going to run another quick poll. Recently, there was an article Bob Graham pointed out to us that in Skipped that the Hilton CEO says comeback depends on how quickly contactless tech features roll out. So this is the CEO of Hilton, one of the biggest hoteliers in the world, and he's closely aligning the recovery curve with technology. So we have a question in the context of that. We have a question in the context of, where's my poll? There it is. Let me go to poll number 2, forgive me. In the context of Chris Nasetta's statements about this, which of the following technologies do you plan to review and acquire in order to support guest and or revenue recovery? So please, I'm going to launch this, and please take a moment to answer the poll. And also, if you have any questions right now, please use the Q&A section, and we will, the panelists can go ahead and start answering that. I mean, I think, Jas, you can sort of start. We have one person says, interesting point, Yas. Are you suggesting that the focus will be on selling room space rather than the features or room types?
I think there is definitely an opportunity to do so. You know, a feature could be, you know, away from public spaces, away from the elevator. You know, these things that are not normally not designed or set up into a room category can now be added as a feature. So yeah, there is, you know, prior to COVID-19, there were some larger companies thinking about attribute-based selling. I think post COVID-19 and with some of these digital upsell strategies, that's definitely an opportunity, because it allows you as a hotelier to give guests the opportunity to buy more direct what they truly want.
And then another question to follow on, probably along the same lines. So acquire the guest first and then upsell them after or before arrival. So I think that was the takeaway, was that there's going to be a battle for acquisition that's going to involve probably lower than comfortable rates. And the question really is, you know, how do you make up that revenue? If you want to expand on that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can expand a little bit. So I kind of talked a little bit about it. So I think the way it is there's going to be a battle, as you said, Paul, to get guests to come to your hotel. So you're going to give them a rate that's probably lower than you want to give them, because your competition will do the same thing. Guests will look for a deal because they know there are deals. Like, you know, for example, myself, I was looking for a flight yesterday to Naples, and it's so cheap now that I'm going to expect only to find a cheap one, and the same probably will be with the hotel. But that's the first mindset. So once you know, let's just assume that they've picked your, you know, low rate to come to your hotel, and they usually do that a week or two before they go to a hotel, generally speaking. As they get closer to the hotel, they feel comfortable about the first deal you've given them. I think the opportunity to then spin up another deal through them, either through guest messaging or, you know, with the help of these upgrade technologies that are existing out there, and send that in a nice way to the guest, give them another opportunity to give them a second deal, or, you know, give them the perception that they get a second deal, I think will really help you get your room rate back to probably what you wanted to get for it in the first place, while at the same time you give the guest the perception of a very nice deal in a very nice room.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll right now and show the results. Kind of interesting. Mobile check-in, check-out is very popular. So is mobile key, surprisingly enough, despite the capital expenditures it requires to change out door locks or whatever. A mobile key is certainly something that is going to get a big boost from the current environment. I think that as we're approaching 1 hour, I think we want to probably wrap it up. We have time for probably one more question. Dan, do you, we have a question here that says, we are thinking about slimlining our organization, but don't want to lose out on quality. What should we do? I'm assuming slimlining means making some refinements to staffing in light of the lack of occupancy.
Right. Yeah, so what I would say there is relevant, that I believe is relevant to find processes that are recurring that you can automate. By automating certain processes that you do over and over again, you can free up time from your staff to then either slim down and utilize the human resources that are still there to spend quality time with your guests instead of doing the recurring processes all the time. So in that situation, I would look and identify those processes and look for solutions to automate those.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you very much. So if you want, this is going to be the end of the webinar currently. If you're interested in asking more questions to our panelists, you know, you can contact them directly through their websites, Roomdex, Event Temple, and Book Boost. Hopefully we will have a recording of this webinar that's available on all of those sites as well. And thank you very much for attending today, and have a great week.
Yeah, Paul, just to add to that, we actually will record, we have recorded the session, and we'll post it on our websites in the next day or so.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone.
Thank you very much, everyone.
For coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.